Welcome everybody to another Flipping Tables. Today we are delighted to have a preview. It's actually a prototype of a game coming very, very soon to Kickstarter. It is a game called The Scare Factory. This is a prototype. All the pieces you're going to see today, all the components are not the final components. So we're going to be able to show you the gist of the game itself and how it plays. But all of these components are subject to change, and some of the rules are still being tweaked as we speak, actually. And we've been communicating with the creator. And I actually really enjoyed this game. Tico, why don't you tell us a little bit, what is the Scare Factory?
So the Scare Factory is a tile laying, you play as monsters. And
it's the reverse of Monsters, Inc.
The reverse of Monsters. So you play as monsters, and the human baddies are trying to sneak into the underworld to steal all of the scare that you have been, making in your factory.
So instead of, Monsters Inc., you have the monsters entering the human world trying to gather scare or gather scream. We now have the humans digging their way into the underground to get into the Scare Factory and try to steal this precious resource. And we, as the monsters, are trying to stop them by scaring them, by laying traps, that sort of thing. And really it comes down to stopping the boss from getting to the factory.
Right.
So every game has a big bad boss. This is the big bad boss. And each boss is going to have cards along the bottom. So the boss cards, each of these boss cards, and every game is going to have a certain number of these cards spread out along the track at the bottom of the boss deck. The boss, I guess it's a player card.
The boss player card.
Yeah, it's the player card for the boss. The object here is to make sure all of these cards, you win when all of these cards are removed. Okay?
Yeah.
And in order to remove them, there are components we're going to show you a little bit later of how that removes. But these symbols here are basically tokens that you're going to place on the board. There's the tokens. They match these symbols. And if you manage to get one of the humans to get into a room with that token, it scares the enemy, and you then are able to take this token and remove a card from the boss deck. Yeah. And that is, the object is really to get the boss down to nothing.
0 cards.
So that you win the game. If the boss happens to make it his way to the factory, you lose. Or if you run out of your own player cards, you are going to lose the game as well.
Right. So the boss doesn't start on the board. The boss will start, and we've actually got this really cool elevator mechanic.
Yes.
So the boss arrival, and you'll start, depending on the difficulty you want, is what floor he will be starting on. The standard game, he starts on the 3rd floor.
And he's going to move down until he reaches the underworld. Once he reaches the underworld, which is the U on here, he is then going to warp into the underworld onto his own spawn card, which will be on the playboard as you build it.
Yeah.
He will then spawn into the game and move through the underworld to try to get to the Scare Factory.
Trying to make his way to the vault.
And there is the vault. So the vault will be a card that is always on the table. And it's the whole thing is built up at the beginning of the game. These are the tiles that you would place down to build a custom board. And here's what's cool about how this thing is made custom. These are tarot-sized cards. This is a deck you're going to shuffle, and at the beginning of the game you're going to choose 3 of these cards, just like that. And this is going to tell you how many room tiles. So we have 5, 6, and 2. So we're going to have 13 room tiles. You're going to take 13 room tiles from the pile, and that is what you're going to start the game with.
Build out your initial floor
These
plan.
Icons, the skulls and the gun icons, determine the number of minions that are going to be on the board to start with. And these are the really cool minions. There's some really nice details with these minions. This is the Ghost Hunter. We've got a Fortune Teller mini. There's a Necromancer. There's a Witch, a Hunter, and a Detective.
Yeah.
Obviously all humans, mystical humans, and hunters that come onto the board. And finally, the crown at the bottom. In this case, we've got 10, 20, 25 25 of these boss cards that we showed you
that we have to
previously.
clear in order to win the game.
You're going to count 25 of these and place them on the boss player card, and those are the cards you need to clear in order to defeat him. Now, setting up the board, you each take turns. Let's clear all of this out. You're basically each going to take turns placing, first of all, starting with the vault tile, and you're each going to take turns drawing a card and placing it around the board until it looks something like this. So this is a sample layout where we've placed the board, the tiles, the room tiles.
Yeah.
We also placed spawn points for each of the minions. So each of the mystical minions are going to spawn in one of those rooms. So we would spawn.
That's your witch, your fortune teller, and your necromancer.
That's right. And then we've got your I can't remember what they're called. Human. They're not human, like the
marshal.
The marshals.
Yeah.
Like the militia.
Yeah.
And that's your ghost hunter, your detective, and your outlaw. And they would spawn in that particular. So anytime that type of character comes on the board, those are the rooms that they would spawn in. You also have really nice looking character. This is the doctor, and the doctor would spawn, of course, in her own room there. And this is the janitor. Fun little character. Each character has their own mechanic, their own special moves. As you can see here, the doctor can place, they can move 5 times. The doctor can place 1 of any token, use up to 3 cards from their ability cards here.
Yeah, which is their health.
Ability cards are also your health. If you happen to lose all your ability cards, your stacks of ability cards, if they're all gone through being attacked, through being used, you're dead.
You're dead.
There is a mechanic to come back, but essentially you are out of the game at that point.
Until you manage to roll your way back in.
And every character has a special ability.
Yeah, so the doctor's is drawing a card for any player. And that's thematic because the cards are your health, and the doctor character can replenish your health.
Here's another great thematic piece. This is the one I played as. The janitor can place up to 3 tokens, use 1 of her cards. Her special ability, being a janitor, of course, she can sweep any tokens on her tile into an adjacent room, an adjacent unoccupied room. But it's great being able to place those tokens. And let's talk a little bit about the tokens. These tokens, as we mentioned, are what you use to scare the enemy, and you need to you're trying to lure the enemy into the rooms to trigger the scare tokens. So you want to place them in rooms, and if you happen to bring an enemy into that room, this token is then used to remove a card from the boss deck.
Yeah.
The cards underneath the symbol according to what type of scare. And then the character, the human, gets scared.
Yeah, you roll the scare die, and that'll determine which way they will flee. So you roll, it's yellow, you have to, the character will exit through a yellow door.
A yellow door. Let's talk a little bit about how these doors work. The way the monsters move on the board is every time it's a monster turn, you roll monster dice. And each of these dice is for a specific monster type. And when you roll it, if it's the blue, that monster type will always walk through a blue doorway. And as you can see on each of these cards, each door has a light on it. So if they're in this room and they must go through a blue door, then they will exit through the blue light. It does not matter what color is on the other side of that door. It matters what color the light is in the room you're in. That determines which way they roll. What I really like about this game is that there's a lot of control given to the player.
Yeah.
So if there's a question as to which way a monster is going to go, you as the player, because it's totally co-op, you decide which way it's going to go.
Yeah.
If you roll a die that has multicolors, you as a player decide which way they're going to go. So you can deliberately push them into a room that has a token, and you can then scare them, because that is the objective of the game.
The other tokens that come into play are the wards, and what you use the wards for is you can actually drop them to block doorways. What that forces the enemy characters to do is they will still have to try to follow suit.
Yes.
And if it's a green, they'll have to try to move green. But if there's a ward there, they don't move through that door.
So instead of moving to green, they would remove the ward.
Yeah.
But then the player decides where they move from that point, because they can't go through the door.
Yeah, they can move them through any door they choose. So it's really an interesting way to sort of maneuver or guide the bad guys in the way
To
you want.
manipulate them. You want them the object is you're trying to manipulate the enemies to go where you've placed the scare tokens and the wards on the doors. You want to funnel them through because you may have a room with a whole bunch of scare tokens on it, right? And you want to ward them. You want to guide them into those rooms to scare them. Any one enemy that's scared 3 times in a turn is removed from the board. And so there's a lot of strategy in where am I going to place the ward, where am I going to place the token, and how do we want to move each of them in order to scare them and get them out of the game.
And the best part too is when they're scared the first time, you're rolling that die and you're moving them. If they enter a room with other enemies, it scares those enemies too, and it creates this amazing chain reaction of scare. So like those guys are now scared, they're going to move into another room. So you get this fantastic like domino effect feeling. It's like if I move him here, it's going to scare them, it's going to move them there, and it's going to scare everybody. And you can get rid of a whole bunch of guys off the board at once.
It is, I really enjoyed the game. It's not a hard game to learn at all.
No.
I mean, there's a lot of little things you got to figure out, but it was not difficult to understand how to play. It's very, very structured. Monsters move, players move, and just keep doing that in a circle. Then after every character move, when we've done our turns, you then draw and bring out more minions onto the board. So minions are constantly being added to the board, and it's really about managing those minions and getting them off the board, purposely scaring them to remove cards from the boss deck or from the boss playfield. And because by the time the boss comes out onto the board, he's going to be moving towards the vault, and you want to make sure he does not get there. If the boss lands in the vault,
you lose.
It is game over.
Done.
You don't want that to happen. Great, wonderful minis. The minis are so detailed, even in this prototype. The minis are
these are
incredible.
Obviously just 3D printed minis at this point. The final versions will be even cleaner than this, and they look great already. Very thematic to begin with.
So look for the Kickstarter of the Scare Factory very, very soon. We are actually going to be talking to the developer of this very soon as well. So look for an episode of Kicking Tables where we're going to talk a little bit more about the Scare Factory. But this has been a preview of the Scare Factory from Supar Games. So check that out on Kickstarter very, very soon. Thanks for joining us. If you really liked this episode, if you liked this preview and you like these game reviews, we would really love if you pressed the subscribe button. Click the subscribe, click the bell to be notified so you'll get a notification of when we have new content. We would really appreciate that. We are working hard to get content out almost every day of the week.
Almost daily. 6 days a week we have new content coming to you.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.